Okay. We are 5 lines from the from where it started to get wide on Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. I don't know if we need to bring in more chairs now for the rest of the people that are just standing up right now. You guys don't have to stand; you can sit down. Okay, so we're by the 2 dots, 2, 4, 5 lines from on Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
I'll get there eventually. Go.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so for those when we 2 nights ago when we last had the shir, so we talked about that if someone is we're discussing the different brachos that you would make depending what the ingredients are and what the mixture is of the foods that you have. So we quoted a brisa a couple of lines ago that said that if someone is chewing wheat, we're going to repeat that brisa now, and then we're going to ask a question on it. So the Gemara says, Amar Mar, Hakobe says Achita, if someone is chewing wheat, and we're talking about raw wheat now, you make a hadam on it. So first of all, 2 things from this. One is that you see that raw wheat apparently is edible, because if it was inedible, you would not make a brach on it. So you do make, or maybe they talk about that this was prepared in some way that even though it was raw wheat, but it was something that you were able to eat. So raw wheat, you make a bari pri adam on it. Tanya, so the Gemara asks, bari b'nei is that we learned in another brayso, bari b'nei Zerayim, that you're supposed to make a bom. Not you don't make a bari pri adama. You're more specific, and you say bari b'nei Zerayim, that you make a bracha that says someone who created the different types of seeds. So why is it that's much more specific than bari pri adama? So my answer is lo kasha Rabbi Yehuda. This is going like Rabbi Yehuda. The one that says that you make. That you say the bracha that says the specific seeds, that's going like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbanan, and this is going like the Rabbanan, the Tanakh, because we learned in the first Mishnah that we learned, a couple of blot ago, we learned that according to the Tanakhama, on vegetables you're supposed to make a bari pri adama. Rabbi Yehuda bari b'nei v'sayim, he says you go more specific and you say that he makes a different types of herbs. So here too, Rabbi Yehuda says that. So this is going that says that Bari b'nei Zerayim is going like Rabbi Yehuda that says you get more specific when you're saying it. We were 5 lines. We started 5 lines from where it got wide, and then we just did the first couple lines after that. Okay, the Gemara says Amar Mar Hakoses es haores. If someone is chewing ores, which is rice, you make a bari pri adam on. Again, we're talking about raw ores, raw rice. You make a bari pri adama. Tchano afo bishlo, but as we learned, again, we did this brisa 2 nights ago. If someone took that ores and he ground it up and he baked it, and then and he turned it into bread, and then he cooked it afterwards. So then, afal pisha haperusos kayamos, even though you're able to see the pieces of the bread after you cooked it, at the beginning you make a bar minei mizonos, and then afterwards you make an al michya. And again, that's talking about where you were able to still see the pieces. That's the bracha you make before and after, according to this Gemara. So Gemara asks, that another brisa says that when you have this type of ores bread that you baked after you cooked it, that you cooked after you baked it, that you don't do anything. When we say that you don't do anything, it means they make a bari nefashos. It doesn't mean that you don't say any bracha at all after you eat it, because you always make a bracha after you eat something. So this is just saying that you make a bari nefashos. It's quote unquote the lesser, the smaller of the other of an al michya or of benching. So we learned in another brisa that you make a bari nefashos, you don't make an al michya. Amar Rav Sheshes lo kasha. It's not a contradiction. It's not a question. Harim Gamliel. Harabanan, that which we said that you make an al michya is going like Rabban Gamliel, and the Rabbanan where we said that you make a shahakol, nothing at all, is going like the Rabbanan who say that you say a shahakol. The Tani that we learned in another brisa, ze'aklal kol shum shiva saminim, anything that you have that is from the shiva saminim. Rabban Gamliel omer shalosh brachos, you make a you have to bench on it after you finish it. V'chachamim omrim bracha achas ben shalosh, you make an al michya on it. Umaytzu Rabban Gamliel v'azakanim. There was a story that happened where Rabban Gamliel and the Zakanim were eating together. Shem Musubim ba'aliyah b'Yericho. They were eating in his in this chamber in Yericho. Ve'aviu lufnehem kosvos v'achlu. They brought before them dates and they ate them. V'nasan Rabban Gamliel rishus Rabbi Kiva levarech, and Rabban Gamliel gave rishus Rabbi Kiva to bench. So kafat zubirech Rabbi Kiva bracha achas mein shalosh. So Rabbi Kiva jumped up and he didn't ask Rabban Gamliel, what should I be doing? Because again, Rabban Gamliel holds amazingly that by dates, anything from the Shiva Saminim, he holds that you bench on it. Okay, not just bread, but he says you would bench after you have anything from the Shiva Saminim. So Rabbi Kiva jumped up, like he very quickly Once Rabbi Gamliel asked him to bench or to make the bracha, the bracha after the meal was over, he made an al michya. So Rabbi Gamliel said to Makiva, how are you going to stick your head in between our machlokas? There's a machlokas I have whether you're supposed to bench or whether you're supposed to make an al michya. So what are you jumping in here in my place? You do this to me in my home. He says, like it's in my place, and you're and you're doing this right now. So he said to him, why are you sticking your head in here and making machlokas? So Amar Los, Rabbi Kiva said back to him, Rabbeinu, Rebbe, even though you say that we should be benching, and the Rabbanan say that you should be making al michya, that you should be making a shahako. He says, that if you have an argument between an individual and the rabbim, you go after the rabbim. So he says, so I just went what they did. So I wasn't trying to stir anything up over here. I'm just following what you told me to do. So Rabbi Gamliel had nothing to say to him about that. Okay, next. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmor, but Rabbi Yehuda says in his own name, Rabbi Yehuda says in Rabbi Gamliel's name, Kol Shu Meshivas Aminim, that anything that is from the Shivas Aminim, turning now to Lamed Zayin U'Beis, V'lo min daganhu, and it's not a type of grain. O min dagan v'lo aso pas, or if it's a type of grain, but you didn't make it into bread. Rabbi Gamliel omer shalosh brachos, you have to bench on that. V'chachamim omer bracha achas, that you just make you make an al michya. Kol she'ena lo mishiva simin v'lo min dagan, but if you have something, and similarly, if you have something that is not from the Shiva Saminim and is not a type of grain, could go past Orez with Dochen, like this Orez, this rice bread that we talked about, or this Dochen bread, which we said was millet. Again, which I still don't know what that is. Rabbi Gamliel Omer Bracha Achas Ben Shalosh, you make an al michya afterwards. V'chachamim Omer V'lo Klum, that you don't do anything. And again, V'lo Klum does not mean anything. It means that you just make quote unquote a brain of fashos on it. So you see from there. But what do you see from there? You see that according to them that you make an al michya after it was cooked on the Orez. That it goes like Rabbi Gamliel, which is not, and the Bryce before, and this Bryce here said you're making a brain of fashos. So what are we doing here? So Gemara says, Mayu Kimta. What are you talking about over here? Rabbi Gamliel, that you want to say that the halacha is doing like Rabbi Gamliel, Ema Seifa of the Reisha. So let's look at the second part of the Reisha that Brysa. Im Eina Prusas Kiyamus, if you're not able to see the pieces of bread anymore, B'tchilim Avarech Allah Bara Minei Mizanos. So in the beginning you take this, what used to be, again, if it was a full bread, there's no question you make hamotzi. We're talking about where the bread has now been baked into baked and then it's been cooked. So it's no longer in its original form anymore. You're not able to discern what it is. So im anaprusos kiyamus, if you don't have any longer, you don't have any bread pieces that you're able to see. But and I think the example that they talk about is if people would make a bread kugel, which I don't. Okay, so that I think that's what I'm talking about, where you had bread, it had been baked, and now you're taking the leftovers and you would cook it, and then you would make this kugel out of it. So in Manaprusos Kamos, if you're no longer able to see the bread, you should make a mizonos in the beginning, and at the end you make an alamichya. Now, Mani, who's this going like? Rabbi Gamliel, if it's going like Rabbi Gamliel, Hashta Aksuvos Vadaisa. Amar Rabbi Gamliel Shalosh Brachos. If on dates, we said before that anything that's from the Shiva Seminim, Rabbi Gamliel holds that you bench on it. So then if the priests are not there, he would still say you're going to say Berachos, because he holds that even if something is not a bread product, you still bench on it. So here, where the bread is there, it's in there. You maybe can't discern it, but the bread is in there. For sure, he would say that you're going to be benching. So it can't be going like Rabbi Gamliel. It must be that you say then that this is going like the Rabbanan, who say that you're supposed to make an al michya and not like Rabbi Gamliel that we said before. Where it says if that's the case, kasha Rabbanan, you have a steer between the Rabbanan whether or not you're supposed to be making a barin of fashos, or whether over here we're saying that you're making an al michya. So it's a contradiction what the Rabbanan say. So how are you going to answer that? So my answer is Elul Olam Rabbanan. Really, I will tell you that this is going like the Rabbanan. And so it's a contradiction. Do you make an al michya or do you make a barin of fashos? And utnei gabi orez, when it's talking about rice, you have to amend it and say to read that you don't do anything, which again would just mean that you make a barin of fashos. So really, they are on the same page, and which is actually the halacha now. And again, anything that I'm saying is not psak halacha, but that is a psak halacha. That when you're eating rice, then you make a barin of mizonos on it in the beginning, and in the end, you make a barin of fashos. You do not make an al michya on it. it. And again, with all these questions, we have these mixtures. They say sometimes the easiest way to solve it is just like eat it during a meal, where, like, for example, like you've already washed during the meal at the beginning of the meal, and then you bring out all these different dishes that you're not sure what the halacha is, what bracha you're supposed to be making on it. It's better to stay away from them ideally. If you're not going to be eating bread, because you just don't know, there's questions what bracha you're going to be making. Okay, next Gemara. Amarava. Hi Rita de Chalkai. If you have this Rita, which is a porridge, which was made out in the boondocks, okay, and it was made in the villages. So in the villages where they have more easy access to the fields, so there the mashpi be kimcha, where they add a lot of flour to it. So mevarich barim nemazonos, and that type of porridge which has different additives in it, but again it has more flour than it does of the other ingredients. You make a barim nemazonos. My taima the smida ikar, because the flour is the main ingredient that you have in that dish. The mechuza, but if let's say you're in the city, the lo mashri be kimcha, where they don't have access to a lot of flour. So, and therefore, they put more of other ingredients into it, which the Gemara will explain. You make a shahakal on it. My taima, because when you're in the city, they had more access to the honey than they did to wheat, to flour, so they would put more honey into it. So if it was more honey, then they would make a shahakal. So you could have the exact same dish, but it's just made with, one is more flour, is made with, as the main ingredient, and in the city, honey is the main ingredient. So when you're out by the villages, you'd make a mazonos on it, and when you're in the city, you would make a shahakal on it. So my time it does shikr, because the Gemara says because the honey is the main ingredient. But Hadar Amarav, and then Rava said, but then again he went back and he said, Aidi bar name mazonos. No, he says in either case, when you have this porridge, this Rita, which again, there's all different words that they're using to describe different types of porridges. When you have this type of porridge, you make a braymin and mazonos on it. The Rav Shmuel Damri Tavaya, because as we said earlier, Kol Sheyesh B'Mechamesh Saminim, B'Varchna Allah braymin and mazonos. Anything that has from the 5 species in it of grain, then you make a braymin and mazonos on it. Amar Rav Yosef, the next Gemara, Hi Chavitza. If you have this Chavitza, which again is it's a dish that has small pieces of bread in it. So the isbei perur and kazayis, if they had pieces in it that are the size of a kazayis, b'tchilim v'varach alav hamotzi lechem in haaretz, l'basov v'varach alav shalosh brachos. In the beginning, you make a hamotzi, and in the end, you make a yud bench on it, which that's a relatively simple idea to understand. The less, but now it's going to get a little bit more complicated. What happens if you don't have these bite-sized pieces anymore of bread, and if they're smaller and they're crumbled up, what are you going to be making on it? The less bei perur and kazayis, if you do not have this chavitza, this porridge does not have pieces of bread in it that are the size of a kazayis. But in the beginning you make a bar min mazonos, and in the end you make an al michya. Amar Rab Yosef, how do I know that if it's that you would make if it's smaller, then you would just make a bar min mazonos and you would make an al michya? Titania, if someone was standing and getting ready to bring the carbon mincha in Yerushalayim, which again was a flour-based carbon that they'd be bringing. So Omer, so first he says, Baruch Shachiyanu v'kimanu v'giyanu azman hazeh. He would make a Shachiyanu, and Rashi says if he hasn't brought one in a long time, so he would make a Shachiyanu. Natlan la'achlan, and then when now again, we non-Kohanim are able to bring a carbon mincha, where we can give a carbon mincha, but we cannot eat the carbon mincha, okay? Only the Kohanim are able to eat from it. So now the Brisa goes on and says, Natzlan la'achlan, when the Kohen takes the mincha to eat, because they would sprinkle some, they would put some of it onto the, they would do this thing called kamitza, which they would put some of the flour onto, some of the carbon mincha onto the mizbeach, and then the rest of the kohanim were able to eat. So now when the kohen takes the mincha to eat it, b'varech hamotzi lechem min haaretz, he makes a hamotzi, v'tani Allah, and we learned the kulan, poslan, kazayis, that all of them, when we're talking about that the pieces that you were there, that there was the size of a kazayis to make hamotzi. So you see that when there are pieces that are in the carbon mincha, that they would then be able to make a hamotzi on it because there were still pieces that were in there that were size of the kazayas. So that's where he says, I get my halacha that I know that if you have this dish that has pieces of bread in it and they are the size of a kazayas, you would make them as a hamotzi on it. Yes?
I always pictured it as loose flour.
So the Gemara is going to talk about that now. What it's like, how much you would pound it up to break it into smaller pieces. So it's going to talk about that right now. Amalei Abai, so Abai says, Latana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, the Amar Parchan Ad Shemach Shdin L'Slasan, according to the Tanakama Rabbi Shmuel, who's saying like what you're talking about, that you would take them, you would keep crushing them until you would turn this into a flour-like state. You would, like you were saying, that you would pound it up into very small pieces. Would you say that you wouldn't make a hamotzi on it? That you wouldn't make, just because the pieces are not there anymore, that you're not going to make a hamotzi on it anymore? Maybe you're going to say that yes, that is the case, that you don't make a hamotzi on the carbon mincha once they pound it up into very smaller pieces. But Tanya, that can't be the case. That can't be, because we learned likate mekulan kazayis v'achon. If someone gathered together all of the pieces of the mincha that he had broken up into little small pieces, so let's say you gathered them all up into again, it's less than a kazayis. But if you took them and you took that mincha and you gathered it all these little what's it called, flour, crumbs. Yeah, I guess crumbs is a good word. Yeah, although we're talking about chametz, I don't know if you want to use crumbs, but yeah, but very small pieces that you're gathering together. And if you gather them together to eat them, im chametzu, if it was chametz when you were eating it, anish kares, then you're going to be chay. If this mincha had chametz in it, you're going to get the chiyuv of kares if you ate it on Pesach. And if it was matzah, then a person is going to be able to fulfill his chiyuv of eating matzah on Pesach. Now, from the fact that you're able to eat it as matzah on Pesach, indicates that even though you had broken it up into many small, to hundreds or thousands of little pieces, but even when it's gathered together, even though there's no discernible bread anymore, or matzah type item in there anymore, you're not able to discern it, you still make a hamotzi on it, because you're able to be yotzi your chiyuv of eating matzah on Pesach. If it wasn't considered to be bread, you wouldn't be able to eat it. You wouldn't be able to eat it on. You wouldn't be able to yotzi, not bread. If it wasn't considered bread / matzah, you wouldn't be able to be yotzi your chiyuv to eat matzah on Pesach with it. So it must be that even though that it's been broken up into small, very small pieces, it's still considered to be that you make a hamotzi on it. So my answer is we're talking about where you took them and you formed it into one piece like a dough, and then you baked them. So now you made like you congealed them all together. So they're not all little pieces, but they're all back together again. So Gemara asks, that the only way that you're able to be yotze your that this would count as matzah is if you were able to eat it b'deich chilas pras, which is a terminology that means that you're able to eat this in the time that it takes to eat a half a loaf of bread. That's what b'deich chilas pras means. And if you're talking about that you took all these little pieces and you baked them back together again, why does it say that you ate them? There's no them anymore. There's no little pieces anymore. If you ate it, you took all the little pieces and you baked them all together. So there's not thousands or hundreds or thousands of little pieces anymore. It's all one big piece. So Gemara answers, and with this we'll finish. That it came, which again this is an amazing concept, that it came from a big loaf of bread. So even though the little pieces are no longer, you can't see the bread anymore, it's not discernible, but the quote unquote the parent bread is still there. Okay, so it's an amazing thing. It's gone. Okay, but the main loaf of bread is still there, so that's still considered to be bread. And again, to prepare for this, I was watching Rabbi Silber from, I don't know, 7 years ago, whenever we did Berachos, and he said, actually, I think it was maybe in the last cycle, and he said, which is just an important lesson to realize that you got to stick, like how important it is to have something to cling to. Like even if you are in a place where you're not, you're not a whole piece anymore. Maybe you're broken right now, but as long as you still have that mother load, that home base is still attached to, so that's the important thing, that you're still going to be considered to be part. You're still considered part of the overall of the overall item. Okay, we will stop here.